Hey there. So today we're going to talk about the old fashioned. So what is an old fashioned? Why do we call it an old fashioned? Where did the term come from? What's the deal with that? So here's a little bit of history before we start making the drink. So if you were to go back in time in a time machine and you wanted to order an old fashioned in like 1840, you wouldn't actually order it by ordering an old fashioned. You'd actually ask for a whiskey cocktail. Now, why would you order it as a whiskey cocktail and not an old fashioned? Well, the word old fashioned, the term for that cocktail, hadn't come about yet. It first appeared in print on a menu in 1869 in Chicago. So the reason for that is because at the time, a new whiskey drink had arrived on the scene, the Manhattan. And it was so popular and revolutionary that everybody was drinking Manhattans. So if you were drinking a whiskey cocktail at that point, it was considered old fashioned. Now, why would it be considered old fashioned? In 1869. So the reason is because if you go back in time to 1809, that's when the whiskey cocktail first rose into prominence. Basically, in 1809, the word cocktail first appeared in print in the Hudson Valley, New York newspaper. And it defined a cocktail as containing spirit, bitters, and sugar, as well as water. So water in the form of ice is going to make our old fashioned. So, or whiskey cocktail if you prefer. Now, between a whiskey cocktail and a Manhattan, there was another permutation. They started experimenting, adding other different liqueurs into their whiskey cocktail. And so they called that a fancy whiskey cocktail or an improved whiskey cocktail. So in order to show the transition from an old fashioned all the way through to a Manhattan, we're going to make those three drinks today. So to start out with, we're going to make an old fashioned. Now, there's a lot of different ideas about how to make old fashions. There's actually regional differences between old fashions. If you're in the state of Wisconsin and you order an old fashioned, you're not going to get a whiskey drink. You're going to get a brandy drink. They're going to muddle some fruit, and they're going to ask if you want it sweet or sour, and that means whether or not you want it with sweet is going to be Sprite, and sour is going to be Squirt. So a very different drink than the old fashioned that we're going to make today. Today we're going to make a right proper 1800s whiskey cocktail or old fashioned. So in order to start, you're going to want to stir this drink up. When you stir it, you're going to want a mixing tin like this guy. Now, we're going to want some type of sweetener. Some folks will use simple syrup. I personally prefer a lump of sugar. A lot of bar books will actually mention a lump of sugar from 1940 into 1950. I got a copy of the Mr. Boston's book from 1974. It still mentions a lump of sugar all the way up into the 80s. It's not until the 90s in the Craft of the Cocktail where Dale DeGroff just recommends using a teaspoon of sugar. Now, older bar books will also mention using a teaspoon of sugar. That's okay too. Doesn't really matter. If you want to use simple syrup, that's okay too. Your drink's it's going to actually dissolve better and mix better. Here's the key difference if you're going to use a teaspoon of sugar or lump sugar is you're going to need to muddle the lump sugar with your bitters. That's a big part of that. You're going to want to make sure you break it up. Any way you slice it, you're not going to be able to dissolve all of this sugar. Nor if you use a teaspoon of sugar, you're going to dissolve all the grains of sugar. It's not going to happen when you make the drink. And that's okay, because what happens when you drink the drink is it will actually become sweeter over time as the ice melts and it further dissolves that sugar. So the old fashioned will actually evolve over time as you enjoy drinking it if you're drinking it on the rocks and you made it with sugar or with lump sugar. Now, if you make it with simple syrup, you can enjoy it, and it's going to taste pretty much uniform from the beginning of the drinking process through to the end, depending on how much the ice dilutes it, of course. But the idea is that if you use lump sugar or a teaspoon of sugar, you're going to wind up with a drink that evolves as you sip it, as long as you're enjoying it over a decent length of time. If you're going to just gulp it down, then by all means use simple syrup and make your life a little easier. So here's how I like to start. We take a little bit of our lump sugar, the brand new pack, bada bing, bada boom. These are sold as sugar cubes. Sometimes they're sold as sugar dots, in which case they're usually more circular. They even make brown sugar ones, which are really nice if you enjoy a little bit of a richer taste in your Manhattan. Or I'm sorry, in your old fashioned, that is. All right. The first one's always the toughest to get out. So here we go. We're going to throw our cube right into our tin. Now what we're going to do is take our bitters. The classic is Angostura bitters. We're going to use Watkins aromatic bitters. It's just what I got on hand. It's really nice. It's got gentian root, just like Angostura bitters. Bitters are essentially a tincture of roots and other vegetables and plant matter. In this case, we got vanilla bean, we got walnut leaf, gentian root, a whole bunch of good stuff. Usually you want 2 dashes of bitters. I threw a little bit more in there. I'm trying to dissolve down this sugar cube. And you know what? It's my old fashioned. It's okay. Whammo. As you can see, we got our cube pretty well saturated there. So now we're going to take a muddler, or what they would call in the 1800s a toddy stick. You'd also use this to make a toddy. You're going to muddle that up. Now your sugar cube's going to turn into a little bit of a paste, as you can see there. I like to leave the muddler in because when I pour the whiskey over it, it's gonna clear off any sugar or any bitters that are left on the muddler. When you go to measure out your whiskey, we're gonna want 2 ounces for our old fashioned. So these are 2 different styles of jiggers. Now the word cocktail, some people, some stories go that the cocktail is named after the shape of the jigger, because this in French is called a coquetier, which is an egg cup. And you'd serve a soft-boiled egg in this little cup and you crack it open with a spoon. I don't think that's actually the origin of the word cocktail. David Wondrich, who's a cocktail historian, says the word cocktail comes from the practice of putting a piece of ginger in a horse's rear end in order to perk its tail up to make it look more able to be sold, like it had more energy. He's done a lot more research than me, so I'm going to trust David Wondrich on that one. At any rate, the thing to note about when you use a jigger is make sure that you're using the right size jigger. These 2 jiggers look pretty similar. I mean, this one's obviously taller than this one, but here's the key thing here. This is a 2 ounce, 1 ounce jigger. The bigger side is 2 ounces, the smaller side is 1 ounce. This guy's a 1.5 ounce, 1 ounce jigger. So just make sure that you're using the right measure. So I'm going to use 1 of this 2 ounce side as opposed to 2 of this 1 ounce side, or a 1/2 ounce on this side and then 1.5 ounces on this side, just to make my life a little bit easier. When you're buying jiggers, you can buy jiggers that are graduated like this guy on the right, or jiggers that are not graduated. If you're just starting out, I would highly recommend that you buy a graduated jigger, just so that you can learn where the pour lines are on a jigger, because the whole reason is to measure accurately. And if you have graduation marks, like this guy, you'll be able to measure more accurately. On this jigger in particular, the one side is graduated to 1/4 and then 1/2, and the other side is just graduated to 3/4 and then 1/3. You won't really use 1/3 of an ounce measurement very often if you're measuring out classic cocktails, but it is nice to have that. At any rate, we're going to measure out our whiskey. Today we're using Old Crow, the food service industry professional's preferred bourbon. Basically, this is the same mash bill as Jim Beam, but it's in a lower proof and bottled in a convenient shatterproof plastic bottle. Naturally, you can use better bourbons. You can use rye whiskey. You can even make an old-fashioned with brandy, like I mentioned before, if you're in the state of Wisconsin. You can even make a gin old-fashioned, and to be quite honest, they're delicious. All right, so we got this guy ready to go. Boom, 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 boom. All right, so now that we got that guy all ready, we're going to throw some ice in there, and then we're going to stir it up. And I'm going to show you a little thing or two about proper stirring technique. So I like to rotate the muddler around just to make sure that we get any of that good stuff off of there. All right, give me 1 sec here. Thank you. All right, so we got some ice in there. Bingo. Kind of hard to angle with the camera. I don't want to spill the salt. So now, when you go to stir a cocktail, what you want to do is take your spoon like this. This is a bar spoon. It's got a weighted handle there on the end, so that way it's easier to stir. Now you want to take your spoon and try and run the outside of the spoon down and inside the rim of the glass, so that when you're stirring it, the spoon is always facing on the inside. So that way it's actually stirring it up. Now when you go to stir, what you want to do, maybe I'm not showing it very well, so I'm going to bring these 2 fingers back while I bring these 2 fingers forward. So the reason why we do that is because if you stir like this, your shoulder's going to not be very happy with you, nor is your wrist. If you stir like this, part of your body that's really actually doing all the work is all the forearm muscles. And it's honestly a lot easier. You're basically pushing with 2 fingers and pulling with the other 2. No big deal. When you're stirring up an old-fashioned that you use sugar in, you also make sure that you want to draw up when you're stirring, so you're bringing the sugar granules up into the liquid in order to make sure that they dissolve as much as you possibly can. Now, how long should you stir it? It's up to you. It really doesn't matter. The ice makes a big difference. If you got crushed ice or ice that isn't very densely frozen, it'll end up diluting it pretty quick. If you got, one big cube in there, it's going to be a while. You can stir it for a long while. Bar books will typically say about 15 stirs in one direction and then 15 in the other. And I'll tell you from first-hand experience, it's rather hard to switch directions mid-stir. There we go. This looks pretty good to me. When you look into it, what you're going to look for to make sure you stirred it right is any bubbles that form are going to stay there for a little bit. That shows you that you've increased the viscosity by stirring it and lowering the temperature. The target temperature for a good cocktail is -6 to -8 degrees Celsius. You can actually buy bar spoons that got a little thermometer on them in order to make sure that you're hitting your right target temp. Now what we're going to want to do is strain this into a chilled glass with a nice big rock in it. So let me go and get that ready. When you go to strain, these are what we call Hawthorne strainers. You can use a Hawthorne strainer with a mixing tin like this, or you can use a julep strainer. I don't have a julep strainer that's the right size for this mixing tin, so we're going to use a Hawthorne strainer today. Hawthorne strainers come in a bunch of different styles. This guy is a lot cheaper than this guy. As you can see, the spring is a lot looser and a lot wider. It's going to be less effective at filtering out the ice chips that we don't want in our drink. So now we're going to take a big block of ice, like so. I like ice tongs myself. Throw that right in our chilled glass. And now we're going to strain our drink. When you go to strain a drink, you can move the strainer forward and back. That's what we call gate controller. So we're going to control the gate there. No ice chippies. Looking pretty good. Bingo, bango. Now, when we go to garnish this, what we're going to use is an orange peel, and I'll show you a couple different ways that you can garnish your old-fashioned. I think the garnish actually makes a big difference in how the end cocktail ends up tasting. The reason is because the orange zest that we're going to add to this on the surface of the cocktail tastes different whether you flame it, and it tastes different depending on how much you add. So I'm going to show you first the easiest way to add orange zest to a cocktail, and that's using a Y peeler or a citrus peeler, or also sometimes just called a veggie peeler. It looks like this. What we're going to do is take our orange, all right, and you're going to take your Y peeler, and you want to make sure that the blade is facing the orange, and you're just going to zest it right over it, okay? Now, if you put your finger on top, if you're working at a restaurant, you're going to be wearing gloves to do this, mind you. Put your finger on that top bit, and you're going to hold on to the orange so it doesn't just fall right in. Now you got a strip of orange. As you can see, I didn't cut it very consistently across, but that's okay. We're going to take our wide end, hold it like this. And that way, when we pinch our fingers together, it's going to express the orange zest right through and over our drink. So there we go. Now that adds a little bit of orange zest. I'm not as particularly skilled with the old veggie peeler as I am with a channel knife. So I'm going to show you that one next. And then I'll show you how to flame an orange peel. And for that one, a lot of folks will use a veggie peeler, and they'll make a big wide strip, and then they can get a great flame out of it. I'm less proficient, so I'm going to use a knife, and I'll show you the way that I like to do it. And it's usually a little bit easier and a little bit more consistent, at least for me. So we got another orange. The reason I grabbed a new orange is because this one doesn't have a cut in it, and you're going to see why, because we're going to rotate this guy. Before you go to garnish anything, make sure you peel off any stickers. They're going to get in your way. Here we got ourselves a channel knife. Channel knife has a little blade there for cutting a channel. Now the depth of that blade is what's going to determine the depth of the channel. You want a nice channel knife like this one because the blade depth isn't too deep, so it's not going to cut too much into the pith the white part of the fruit's flesh that is rather bitter. The main point of this is to express the zest out of it. All right, the cutting part right here, the blade, is set perpendicular to the handle. Now that makes it easier for us to use because that way we can keep our hands free and rotate the fruit. If the blade was set parallel to the handle, we'd have to hold the knife like this, which is a lot harder to do. So what we're going to do is take our channel knife and we're going to take our drink and we're going to zest it over it. Now the key thing here is to try and hold, you want to hold the knife still and rotate the fruit along its own axes. If you move the knife instead of the fruit, you'll get the same effect, but it's much easier to lose control and cut yourself, and being cut by these is very unpleasant. You want to start at one of the, the top or the bottom of the fruit. Doesn't matter which, because we're going to go around in a circle around it in order to cut our channel. And then I'm going to show you a cool way to make an orange twist using the channeled fruit that we've cut. So I rotated it. Now again, you'd be using gloves if you were working in a restaurant. I got a pretty long zest here. So what I'm going to do is end the cut right like that. Now I'm going to take my bar spoon. Now it's important that we use one with a weighted end. If it has a fork on the end or a little skull or a thumb or something else that's cool, you won't be able to get the twist off of it. Let me show you another bar spoon where I couldn't make a twist on it. This guy looks pretty cool. It's actually kind of unwieldy, and you certainly can't get a twist off where that giant handle is, nor where the spoon end is. So just a heads up. Now when you go to make a twist, you're going to take the fruit and you're going to take your hand and you're going to hold it, pinch it right like that. Right? Now I'm holding the spoon end because I want to take it off at this end. Now what we're going to do is spin this around in order to wrap it up like a bit of a ribbon. So, here we go. There we are. Now we're just going to tighten that ribbon a little bit. And we've got ourselves a really beautiful orange twist. Tighten that just a wee touch more. Now we're going to swing this off. Right, like so. And voila. If I had a cocktail pick to put that on, I'd throw that right on there. Instead, I'm just going to toss it right in my drink. Beautiful. Now, this drink is absolutely going to be delicious because of all that zest, but we're going to do one last little touch because the compound that is found inside of the orange peel is called limonene, and limonene is flammable. And when you ignite it, it actually changes its flavor. Limonene is found in the flesh of both orange peels as well as lemon peels. It is not, however, found in lime peels. So don't try and show off a fancy trick with lime that I'm going to show you here with an orange with a lime. Otherwise, it's not going to work so well. So we take our orange. Oh, there's my knife. Cut ourselves a little ovoid shape here. Why an ovoid shape? Because it's going to be easier to express the zest out of this ovoid shape. So we're going to hold it similar to how we held the other one, that little ribbon that we cut using the citrus peeler, right like so. Now I'm holding the long ends of the oval so that way when I squeeze it together, you're going to see a bunch of zest come out of here. Now if your oranges were just in the fridge, like this one was, you might want to wake it up a little bit by holding your lighter underneath it, or your match if you're using matches, just to wake it up. It doesn't need to be in contact. The hottest part of the flame is from the lighter is actually above it. So there we go. This is feeling pretty good. All right, so now what we're going to do is ignite using either your match or your lighter, and then you're going to squeeze your fingers together to express the zest out of this and through the flame over top of the cocktail. Right, like so. Now that was a pretty good little stream of flame. If you want it more like a camera shutter, you snap your fingers together much more quickly. Like that. So, there we go. Now you throw a maraschino cherry or a cocktail cherry or a brandy cherry in this guy and you call that a day. And for my taste test, we're going to have the lovely Sherry try this out. So yeah, that's how you make a pretty proper old fashioned. Sorry I didn't put the cherry in it. I think you guys can handle that part on your own. There we go. So that's a little bit about proper stirring technique and proper zesting and garnishing technique with a little bit of cocktail history. So I hope you enjoyed that, and you'll come back when I talk about the improved whiskey cocktail, or sometimes called the fancy whiskey cocktail, and then finally the Manhatten. Oh, and also, if you like any of the products that I used, make sure that you go down and scope them out. They're going to be down there in the links. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time.